manna. In Psalm 86, 15 through 16, it says, "You, O Lord, are a God full of compassion and gracious, long-suffering and abundant in mercy and truth. O turn to me and have mercy on me. Give your strength to your servant and save the son of your maidservant." The psalmist has some attributes there listed about God's graciousness and his ability to be very long-suffering with you and with me, his abundance and mercy. But then he drops this word truth. And if you think about this for a second with me, um, that's kind of it doesn't truth doesn't really follow with those things, because let's think about what's true about you, what's true about me. The scriptures say that we have all sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and the wages of sin is death. The truth is, we don't deserve God's grace. We certainly don't deserve his grace. We don't deserve even his mercy. And why should he have compassion on us? He's holy. He came and lived, as Hebrews says, Hebrews 4:15, "We do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin." So he took on flesh and he lived perfect life without falling, subject to the sinful nature, and proved that he was able to do what we could not. And so his holiness and at the character level, his justice towards what's wrong, what's sinful, what's rebellious towards God, being dealt with according to the law, is just as much of who he is in truth as these other attributes. And it's always amazing to me when I think about what the gospel does, how it's like that golden thread that weaves through God's attributes in this mysterious, really beyond logical way. Our reason and our logic just really falls short when it comes to God's ability to be both just and gracious, when it comes to his ability to be holy and truth, and yet be full of compassion and mercy on those who are ignorant. And his ability to be both things that seem to be a contradiction. Now I'm going to go a little bit logical and theological on you here. So contradictions are not the same as paradoxes. Contradictions are when you say this is true and it's false at the same time or in the same way. And those are illogical. Contradictions don't work. They don't follow logic. It's really like the foundation of logic. You can't have a true and a false in the same way at the same time. But a paradox is different than a contradiction. They're similar in some ways, but they are not the same thing. A paradox are two things that seem to contradict but do not, because they are not true and false in the same way and at the same time. And this is where theology gets interesting, and where our understanding of God's character and nature really falls short due to the limit of humans' intellect. Okay, so another word for a paradox, things that seem to contradict, is concurrent truths. So two truths that are that are traveling next to each other, and they're both true, and they seem to contradict, but they are both true in their own right, and it's not illogical for them both to be true. So a big example of this is that God is both sovereign, and man, it has real, true, free will, and can be held accountable for his free will rightly and justly, even though God is sovereign. So that one, if you've ever been to Bible school, or if you've ever been to a seminary campus, that one is one of the favorites of Bible students, to just go around and around. And it'll wear you out going around and around on that conversation, to the point where you might just go, you know what, I don't even want to talk about this anymore. But so God is both sovereign, and man has a true free choice. The Bible teaches both of those things, and those are concurrent truths. The Trinity is another big one, the doctrine of the Trinity, that God is both one and he is both three persons. Concurrent truths, they seem to contradict, because something can't be one in the same way at the same time that it is also three. But the scriptures put both of these truths up as concurrent truths, not as contradictory truths. And so understanding that, often in these big topics like this, that it goes beyond our ability to wrap our minds around. And so thank goodness that we can just trust that God's revelation is true, and that he is who he says he is. And at the end of the day, if we don't get everything buttoned up and tied up and all the loose ends taken care of, that two truths that seem to rub up against each other are able to be in the character and nature of God concurrently, and not illogically. So a lesser concurrent paradox, if you might say it that way, than those two is the one that I was just wanting to touch on with you in this time, and that is that you have the gospel really allows God to be perfect in his holiness, in his truth, and in his justice on one side. Okay, those truths assume that, like, sin can't go undealt with, that he's just, that he's going to deal with sin. He's going to bring perfect justice according to the law, according to his holiness, and he's not going to let rebellion and sin and all of that, Satan and all those who follow in his ways, he's not going to leave that undealt with. So that's one thing. And then the other side of it is that God is merciful, and that he is compassionate, a high priest that's able to identify with this frame that we have. Hebrews 5:2 says he can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray. And then in Psalm 103:13 and 14, as a father pities his children, so the Lord pities those who fear him. For he knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust. And so for those who fear God, for those who trust him, they get exposed to these character attributes of God that are a paradox to his justice and his holiness and his absolute truth. And that is that he is willing to be merciful and compassionate towards the ignorant. And not only that, he has grace for those who love him. So we have mercy as not getting what you do deserve. So that would just be like not going to hell. That's what we deserve. So mercy is like, okay, we get bailed out of jail, so to speak. And then his grace takes it further. And his grace says, not only am I not going to give you what you do deserve, I am going to give you a gift that is undeserved. I'm going to give you more than just zero. I'm going to give you infinitely a gift that's infinite in quality and in quantity. And that's what's so amazing about God's grace is it doesn't just get us to zero. We're in a negative bank account. We just get to zero, but his grace takes us into the positive forever. And can I wrap my mind around that? Why do I get his grace and someone else doesn't get his grace just based on the fact that I'm trusting in him and they don't want to trust in him? Um, how does that all work and sort out to be just and uphold God's holiness and also his gracious character? Man, I just know that I want to be a recipient of these attributes: grace, compassion, mercy, steadfast love, long suffering. That's where I want to find myself, in the favor of the Lord, as I fear him in the beginning of wisdom and receive all that he wants to pour into my life. Otherwise, the attributes and the character that I get exposed to are going to be God dealing perfectly and justly with my sin, in that I would have to pay for it myself, and that his holiness would require me to depart from his presence. For I am a man of unclean lips, right? As the prophet said. So I want to encourage you to just throw yourself on his mercy and his compassion and his grace, and make sure that you're trusting in his grace, because both of these are coming down the pike. Both God's fullness will be revealed in time, and you don't want to be facing his justice square in the face without Jesus Christ in between you and him. And so just remember, two things can seem to contradict, but they can be concurring truths. They are not a contradiction logically. They're just a paradox. So continue to have fun in the truths of God's word and his revelation. And as we stumble through the two things that can rub up against each other, and seeing how can it be true that God is both one and God is both three in one. Don't let that wash away your faith, but let your faith be built up, that he is beyond comprehension, beyond understanding. His ways are not our ways. His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And let that be a faith stir, and not a reason for you to say, "Oh, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't follow logic. I'm out." So, hey, God bless you. I hope that was encouraging to you this morning.